The pharmaceutical industry in Nigeria has been on the rise since the late 19th century. It began with the training of Nigerians through apprenticeship under European physicians. Before this, medical knowledge was largely kept by traditional healers. These apprentices would prepare simple solutions and mixtures and would either serve them as dispensers in the hospitals or open medicine shops to serve the Nigerian community. One of such early shops was that of Mr. Richard Zacchaeus Bailey. It was opened in 1887 along present-day Balogun Street in Lagos. It mainly catered for European clients and a few African elites. Today we have Dr. Chinonso Egemba, popularly known as Aproko Doctor, to discuss some of the challenges of the rising pharmaceutical industry.
Healthcare has come a long way, and there is need for collaboration, especially now. And celebrating the National Pharmacists Day is important because it also lets the public be aware of who pharmacists are and what their job description is. Because when you ask the average Nigerian, when you go to the hospital, what do you see? They will just tell you the doctors and nurses, and it's almost like every other profession fades into the background. So I think it's important.
By the end of 1960, as many as 150 community pharmacy shops had been established, and the total number of registered pharmacists was 542.
So the impact of pharmacists, first of all, makes the job of the doctor easier by making sure that the right doses are given. I would speak for myself. If you work in a high impact or high energy profession, like a busy hospital, for instance, there's every chance that mistakes can be made. We tend to run what we call the cheesecake model. So we're making sure that a hole doesn't come out of the next hole. And that way you can stop mistakes from getting to the end user, which is the patient. So if a mistake is made on the aspect of the doctor, the pharmacy should block it before the drug gets to the patient. So there's some impact that they give to the healthcare sector in Nigeria. Then also in the area of drug development and dispensing and the rest of it, yes, there is some impact.
The pharmaceutical industry in Nigeria started in 1944 with May and Baker and expanded in 1954 with Glaxo and Pfizer. These companies were mainly into importation and marketing of pharmaceuticals.
For one, drugs are easier to procure, unlike before where drugs had to be imported. And because they're easier to procure, because they're made in the country, the cost is reduced. These two factors alone would help reduce the cost of healthcare in Nigeria and thereby help the health indices of the country.
Large-scale drug production didn't start until the late 60s, involving government agencies, multinational companies, and private entrepreneurs. Presently, there are more than 115 registered pharmaceutical manufacturers in Nigeria, providing dependable, high-quality pharmaceutical products to medical professionals and patients in Nigeria and West Africa. This has greatly contributed to the economic growth of the nation, but there are still many challenges.
In as much as some progress has been made, there is need for improvement. When it comes to drug regulation, we still need a lot more of the governing bodies to make sure that these drugs do not fall into the hands of the wrong people. Currently, we still have people who are not licensed to dispense drugs, still dispensing drugs.
Talking about fake prescriptions and the rise of drug abuse, Aproko Doctor further explains what every drug consumer needs to know.
So when it comes to who abuses the drug the most, I would say the end user. And while the prescribers in some ways still share some of the blame, we won't let them go scot-free just because they're prescribers. For instance, in the aspect of antibiotic resistance, when it comes to antibiotic resistance, one major factor is the indiscriminate use of antibiotics. In some way, the health professionals are to blame, but most of the bulk of this indiscriminate use and abuse come from the end user. So there is still need to educate the end user on the need for the right prescription of drugs just before you take them.
Apart from the economic benefits that the growth of the pharmaceutical industry will bring, it is also needed to improve healthcare in the country and thus the life of every Nigerian citizen.
It's quite difficult to place the responsibility of that on just the consumer, because anybody could open a pharmacy and place qualifications, and you really do not have the competence to question such qualifications, because that's not what you studied in school, that's not your field. But I would say they are registered names, or they are well-known names for pharmacies. It's best to go to such places rather than go to the roadside. I will use the word chemist, that's what we know them as here. Go to the roadside chemist and just get your drugs, for instance. I would say go to already established places. I think there is a database of pharmacists in Nigeria that should be made available to the end users so that they know what names to trust and what names they shouldn't trust.